Hello and welcome to Otterwood Cottage, where we're building a brand new smallholding in the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside. I'm Emma and we're delighted to have you along with us. In today's recipe, I'm using one recipe to create 3 great products for your kitchen, all using unripe apples, and in this case pears, which you'll find are from your thinnings, from your fruit trees, or may even just be on the floor from your June drop. So this year we have deliberately thinned out the fruit on our apple and pear trees, and I didn't want to just throw the fruit straight onto the compost pile, so I investigated some ways we could use it, and I'd intended to use it to create 2 products, and then because of a mistake and something going wrong, we actually discovered 3 fantastic, delicious and useful things for your kitchen using these scraps that would otherwise just go to compost. So you can see here that, as well as the thinnings from the apple and pear trees, I'm also adding 1 lemon, and you'll also need some sugar for this recipe, but that is all you will need. And to start with, I'm just roughly chopping the apples, the pears and the lemon and popping them in a large pot. And you can see here that where there are blemishes in the fruit because insects have got inside or they've been damaged, I'm just cutting the worst of that away. That's going in the pile to go in the compost, and then the fresh fruit is going into the pot, both the apples and the pears. And once they're all chopped and in the pot, I'm going to take them over to the sink and fill that with water. So at this stage, for the first step in the recipe, we've got nothing in the pot here other than the apples, the pears and the lemon, and then some water which I'm just filling to the point where the fruit starts to float. So it's just covering the top of the fruit in my pot. And then I'm taking that over to the stove and popping it on a high heat to boil, and for all of that fruit to start to soften down and break down into the water. And then I'm leaving that to bubble away on the stove until it's reduced by about 1/3 to 1/2, which in this case, because I had so much, was well over an hour of bubbling away. And then once that's reduced right down, and I leave it to cool so that it's easier to handle. You're not trying to pour boiling liquid, so I'd left this to cool whilst we were doing other things, having dinner and other things that evening. And then I lined a second large pot with a muslin cloth, poured the mixture into it, and then tied the 4 corners of the cloth together, ready to allow the juice to strain through overnight. And I do this by taking 2 opposite corners, tying them in a knot, and then the other 2 opposite corners, which I'll thread through underneath the knot I've just created and tie those over the top. And the last stage in making our first product is to hang up the now tied muslin cloth. I have a hook here, and we're fortunate that above our stove is a drying rack, so I'm able to hook it straight up onto the drying rack. But in our last house, I used to hook bags like this onto the handles of the doors of the upper cupboards. So there are plenty of ways that you can make this work within your kitchen. and I'm just hanging that there without squeezing anything through, just allowing gravity and time to allow all of that liquid to strain out of the mixture. And I left that overnight and came back to it the following morning. And what we came down to the following morning was this liquid pectin. So what we've created so far is this lovely thick liquid which is perfect for using as liquid pectin in any jam or jelly recipe that you might make that calls for pectin. And you can store that liquid pectin in sterilised jars in the fridge, or as I'm choosing to do here, you can freeze it. I'm just freezing it into ice cube trays, so I've got some handily portioned liquid pectin ready to grab and go for any recipe I might need. I took 1 jar of the liquid for my purposes to save just as liquid pectin, and then I got ready to use the rest of the liquid for what was going to be the only other product from this recipe, but turned out to be the second of 3 recipes because I made a bit of a mistake. Let me show you what happened there. To do that, a quick glimpse of what was left in the muslin cloth, which went a tiny bit to the chickens as a treat and the rest to the compost, so no waste. And my intention at this point had been to make some apple and pear jelly. And so to do that, I first weighed how much liquid was left in grams, and then I calculated 2/3 of the weight of the liquid and measured that out in sugar. Just granulated sugar, because this is effectively liquid pectin, it doesn't need to be jam sugar. So 2/3 of the weight of the liquid added in granulated sugar, mixed those together and then transferred them over the stove to boil. And as I say, the intention had been to make a jelly from that, but I had a bit of an issue with my thermometer not working. I couldn't get it to give me an accurate reading, and therefore the jelly didn't set. And that ended up being a really happy accident, because what we ended up making instead was the most delicious and refreshing apple and pear cordial, which we've been enjoying in sparkling water over ice with a sprig of mint. So we ended up making some apple jelly by correcting the unset liquid that we were using as cordial, but we've actually kept more of it back as cordial because it's so delicious. So if you do want to make a cordial rather than a jam, then very straightforwardly, it is the weight of your liquid plus 2/3 of that weight in sugar onto the stove and on a gentle boil until the sugar has all dissolved, and that will give you a lovely thick syrupy cordial to enjoy in an ice cold drink. However, if you do want to make a jelly, then the recipe is exactly the same, the process is exactly the same, but you need to make sure that you are reaching a temperature of at least 104 and giving that a good hard boil for a minute or 2 at that temperature. Now you can either do that with a digital thermometer. I did manage to get mine working, and so when I rescued it to make the jelly, I was able to make sure I got to the correct temperature. Or you can do the cold plate test, where you put a plate in the freezer, bring that out, drop a little bit of the mixture onto the plate, and if it hardens straight away, that after you've been solidly boiling for a good minute or 2, then you know you have got to setting temperature, and if not, just keep it boiling. Now you can see here that you may get a little bit of foam on top of the mixture. That's absolutely fine. You can just scoop it off as you've seen me doing here, and you will have a lovely clear jelly mixture to end with. So here you can see my rescued mixture, which has now jellied up. And again, like the cordial, is absolutely delicious. I'm not sure if I know which I like the most. We made this jar of jelly less than a week ago, and there's basically none left. We've been enjoying it on toast and also with yoghurt for breakfasts. Very yummy recipe all round. So a lovely bonus unexpected cordial, a jelly and some liquid pectin. And all from scraps that I would otherwise have just shoved in the compost. 3 for 1. Can't say better than that.